I know, and I'm sure that your friends, they are wondering why they need rest. And they're still thinking through, why is it that you are telling them that they need rest? Growing up as a kid, I grew up in a family setup where my uncle was a Seventh-day Adventist member, and each and every day we observed the Sabbath day, and when it is evening, we had time every Friday evening. We had good time to rest, to listen to music, and never to do anything. More ways when it comes on the Sabbath day, it was the only day that we could not do any work. We just have food which is already set on the table. After eating that food, you leave your plates, because if you wash the plates, that would be considered as work. What more with Judaism? Judaism looks at the Sabbath so strictly more than the Seventh-day Adventists. They cannot even press a button of an elevator because they consider it to be work. But now the question is, what is the origin of the Sabbath, and why is it that many people, they are trying to take more time about the Sabbath? Actually, this brings us to the passage of this morning in Exodus chapter 23, verses 10. The Bible reads, "For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yard. But the seventh day you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave, the beasts of the field, may eat. You shall do likewise with your vineyard and with your olive orchard. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the seventh day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. Pay attention to all that I have said to you, and make no mention of the names of other gods, nor let it be heard on your lips." Friends, we see that actually our passage is trying to echo the 10th commandment, or the fourth commandment that was given by Moses in the book of Exodus chapter 20. And what we see, the context in which the fourth commandment appears in Exodus 20, it's in a context that it reflects the creation story where God rested and in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. And with that view now, when we come to the next time, when we hear the story of the Sabbath, we move on to Deuteronomy chapter 5, where the context which is set there, it is reflecting to the work that God had done in the lives of the Israelites by saving them from the land of Egypt and the captivity. So the context now of our passage comes in where its reflection, it's not about just the creation of God, it's not about the redemption of God, but it's about worship, because the children of Israel are reminded to pay attention to all what God has said, and they should not mention any other God. Friends, having this, it is reminding the children of Israel about the first command that tells them that they should not worship any other God. Because God obviously knows that the place that they are going to go, it is a place where there are people who have a belief in many idols. They have got small gods that they are worshiping into. And this again reminds us to say the children of Israel are being prepared to enter the land. At this time, they are not yet in the promised land. Friends, this brings us now to verses 10 and 11, where God is dealing with the sabbatical year. Now, when we think about the sabbatical year, this was the year actually God wanted the land to have rest. This should be the caring God who cares about the land. He wanted the land to regain its fertility, Some of us who grew up in rural areas and who grew up as farmers, we may understand that there are moments that you leave a certain piece of land for the whole year without plowing it, so that the other year you are going to plow on it, it may have a good yard. And it seems here it is one of the idea also that God is looking at. And the other thing that he wants the people to understand on the sabbatical year is that the people should realize that there is a need for the poor to have food. And not only just the poor, but even the living creatures that the Lord had created. They need to have food. And more interestingly, when we go into Deuteronomy chapter 15, we see that actually there are some blessings and rules that the sabbatical year should portray in the life of the children of Israel. They are being told that in this year the slaves, they are supposed to be set free. Wasn't it an amazing thing? If you are a slave in Israel, the sabbatical year, you are assured that you'll be free. Which was different from other nations who could not see things in that way. And again, if you were owing someone a debt, that debt was to be forgiven. And more interestingly is that on the 60th year, the Lord blessed the land with enough and abundance, so that the children of Israel, they are going to have enough for the 7th year, and they are going also to have enough to be left to the poor and the living creatures. This is so amazing, friends, that when God, he instructs them about the sabbatical year, he wants them to celebrate in that year. Now when we come to verses 12, what we see is that on the 7th, it deals with the 7th day. And on the 7th day, Yahweh wants people, the Israelites, he wants them to rest. And not only the Israelites, he also wants the animals that are being used to cultivate, to do their farming, to have a rest. But on the other hand, he still wants a refreshment for those slaves that were working in their fields. This now brings us to verses 13, where he gives a command or a reminder about the first commandment, that they should not even mention any other god. Friends, having talked about all these things, it reminds me when I grew up in a mining area where things were a bit difficult because we could only see our parents every Saturday and Sunday. From Monday to Friday, they will leave as early as 04 a.m. and come around 10 p.m. So the only time for us to see our parents, it was on a weekend. And you can imagine when it is a Friday, you are looking forward for the next day to see your parents. And we could see even in the eyes of our mother how things were happening. That day should be very happy, rejoicing. And we could see the big man seated the other side, resting. All of us at one point would want to have rest. Sometimes we need rest from work, from studies. We need to rest sometimes in certain habitual things that we are doing and we are used. Sometimes we get weary. But now, the Bible tells us when we go in the New Testament, Jesus gives us an important thing that we need to come into and think about. He tells us that the Son of Man, he is the Lord of the Sabbath. But before he mentions of this, one thing that he makes us to understand is that the Sabbath was not created, man was not created for the Sabbath. But yet the Sabbath was created for man. Now I want us to think it in this way. What if we replace the word Sabbath with rest, and we say rest, where it gives us that man was not created for rest. It makes sense. And furthermore, it even tells us that the Son of Man, he is the Lord of rest. So meaning the Sabbath gets its own meaning and its importance in Jesus Christ because he is the Lord over the Sabbath. Friends, it's so wonderful that all of us, when we think of the Sabbath, sometimes we look at it in terms of the law, but it is beyond the law because Jesus Christ is the one who fulfills every law and every command that is given to us. But now what does Jesus tell us in the book of Matthew chapter 11? He tells us that, come to me, all you who are weary, heavy laden. You know, it's more like, if you are tired, come to me. Because Jesus recognized that we need rest, and he encourages us that when we come to him, he is going to give us rest because his yoke is lighter. It's not heavy. Friends, all of us, we have been confronted with sin in many ways. Sin has enslaved us in many ways. But we could think of it having a person who comes to you and encourages you that you need rest. He understands your situation. He looks at you. He feels you need it. And deep down your heart, you know that you are tired and you need that rest. You are tired, struggling on your own, struggling to overcome sin with your own strength, struggling with your addictions. But Jesus says, come and have rest. Friends, having looked at those things, the other thing that we see is that in the book of Hebrews, we are being encouraged to strive to enter into the rest. Among all things that we should miss, and we should not allow ourselves to miss, is the rest of God. So we find that the Sabbath finds its own fulfillment in Jesus Christ. And for us to enjoy that rest, it is only when we receive Jesus as our Lord and our personal Savior. Because he is not just the Lord of the Sabbath, but he is the Lord of our lives if we submit ourselves to him. Are you tired of ancestral worshiping? Are you tired of visiting to sangomas each and every day so that you can have rest, maybe at your workplace? But Jesus encourages us that he is the place where we can get that rest. And friends, having looked at these things, I would want us now to think through in our lives. When we look at the Sabbath, we see that the Sabbath reminds us of the great work God did. Not just creating the world, but the new creation he has made in our lives. Once we received him, we are now called the new creation of God. We are no longer people who live according to the laws of sin, but now we are people saved by the grace of God. And therein we walk in the rest. Then the other thing that we basically see is that when we look at the work that God has done, it gives us the aspect of understanding that we have got redemption in him. God redeemed us from the power of sin. Just like he redeemed the children of Israel from the captivity under the Egyptians, he has redeemed us from that power of sin. Above all, that the thing that we see in verses 13, it reminds us that we are called to worship God. Hence we see that our passage was in a setup that it reminds the children of Israel to see the Sabbath in light of worship. So we are to worship God. And that's why he demands them that they should not make mention of other gods, but they should worship God alone. Now the question is the Sabbath day only the seventh day? Or maybe is the Sabbath day the first day of the week, which is Sunday, which is the day of the Lord? When is the Sabbath day? Absolutely, we see that since we are called to worship Yahweh, to worship God, it means the Sabbath day is an everyday life in Jesus Christ. I challenge you today to think through about looking the rest, not just rest alone in physical work, worldly things, but also rest in Jesus Christ. I want you to think through about these words and speak them deep down to your heart and share them with other people. May the good Lord bless you.